I'm very grateful for the invitation, and I thought I would make my starting point not to look forward, but in fact to look back into Malaysia's history, because there is a historic relationship between the United Kingdom and Malaysia, which actually is unique in the world. And that is that when the British left former colonial territories, they had what I might describe as a three-card trick, which was when that colony became independent, people who had previously been citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies automatically lost their citizenship of the United Kingdom and colonies. But not Malaysia, interestingly. If you go back to 1957, when there were negotiations between the British, and the Federation of Malaysia Independence Act was passed, it was unique in that it contained no provision for the withdrawal of CUKC citizenship. So people who acquired the status of CUKC by birth or connection with the colonies of Penang and Macau, apologies for the mispronunciation, Malacca, I should say, before the 31st of August 1957, retained their citizenship and became dual CUKC Malaysian citizens. Now, of course, the current Malaysian government does not permit dual citizenship. But interestingly, there are a generation of people amongst your parents, some of whom would have retained that citizenship. So it might actually be an interesting line of inquiry to see whether or not some of you might actually enjoy an ancestral entitlement to British citizenship. That's one of my specialisms in the practice. But we are, of necessity, having to look forward to the relationship between the United Kingdom and what I might describe as third country nationals. That's citizens outside the European Union. Now, the government has said that they will create, quotes, a level playing field between the rights currently enjoyed by EU citizens under the Treaty Rights of Free Movement and all third country nationals. And a year ago, they asked the Migration Advisory Committee to advise on what would be the consequences of extending the immigration rules to the roughly 3.2 million EU nationals who reside in the United Kingdom. Now, the Migration Advisory Committee recommended that the cap on Tier 2 migration should be lifted. And when the new Boris Johnson government was elected, they returned to the Migration Advisory Committee a second time and asked them further to advise on, quotes, an Australian-style points-based system. And the Migration Advisory Committee responded by saying, it is a meaningless slogan, and you should not adopt an Australian-style points-based system because you already have in place a British-style points-based system. Because Tier 2 migrants are, if you have a look at your little pink card, it says you are a PBS migrant, and the PBS stands for points-based system. So the system that they are advocating that we should adopt is already in existence. And it has currently a salary threshold of approximately £30,000. So the one thing that the Migration Advisory Committee has recommended is that that salary threshold should be reduced to £25,600. Now, I'm sure all of the people in this room would easily command a gross salary in excess of that sum. But here's the rub. By the 31st of December this year, we're going to find that a decision has to be taken by the government. So pushing the decision backwards and forwards between government and the Migration Advisory Committee is because somebody at some stage has to take a decision. So when we say that things are uncertain, what we can be certain about is that the new regime must be in place before the 31st of December this year. And let me explain why. Currently, EU nationals are exempt from immigration control, not by virtue of any European decision, but by virtue of a thing called Section 7 of the Immigration Act 1988, which means that UK immigration control does not apply to them. Now, there is a bill currently before the House, it's the Immigration and Social Security Bill, which proposes repealing Section 7. So the consequence of that is that if you have to accommodate the immigration needs of those 3.2 million EU migrants, you could not possibly have a limit to the scale of the Tier 2 scheme. But to expand the scale of the Tier 2 scheme such that it was large enough to accommodate 3.2 million additional residence card holders is just a logical impossibility. That can't be done. And that was acknowledged in the government's white paper. So the government said that what they would do is abolish the Tier 2 scheme and replace it with a series of industry-specific or sector-specific visas, possibly administered by the private sector. So can you see, we have a scheme at the moment which is small scale, designed to deal with, at the moment, no more than 24,000 applicants each year, which before the 31st of December this year is going to have to accommodate potentially an additional 3.2 million migrants. Something has to give, and government is not capable of scaling up its activity overnight. They have been attempting to register EU nationals with a simple online registration scheme, and they're not even 2/3 of the way through the number of EU nationals that there are. So it's impossible to suggest that you would then seek to make all of those people move through a scaled up scheme. So it seems to me what we can confidently predict, one is the salary level, which we know all of you will meet with. Second, that it's impossible for them to put a scale limit to it. And third, the third clue as to where government is going is that they have decided to take students out of the net migration figures. Now that's a political signal to say that structurally the numbers are so large that the system has to digest, because remember, it's not just you, it's nationals of 27 other member states who are already here, who are already economically active. They have to fit into a new system. So that system must enlarge, and it must give scope for, I think, dramatically increased third country migration. For the very pragmatic reason, and this is sometimes missed in debates about immigration and numbers, which is why mature countries have large-scale immigration. People often characterise that as a pull, that there is a magnetic attraction for a purportedly rich country. That's not the case. The reason that a country like Britain has quite high levels of migration is because it has an ageing workforce. The numbers, the mental arithmetic is actually quite simple to do. There are 35 million people of working age in the labour market in Britain. That's the highest number of people in work as a proportion of the total population that there have been since official records began in 1971. Those 35 million people who are in work are supporting 9 million school children and minors. They are also supporting 9 million old age pensioners. So that's a dependency ratio of 18 million to 35 million. Now, of those 35 million people, only 2.4 million of them are EU nationals of working age. 500,000 of them are Irish citizens. So actually we're down to just 1.9 million EU nationals. Now, the reason that those people are present is a demographic time bomb ticking under Britain. Because by 2030 we will have an additional 3.4 million old age pensioners. So if you add to a dependency ratio of 18 million, another 3.4 million, it now becomes unsustainable. So that's why an ageing workforce must top itself up with younger age migration. And the Office of Budget Responsibility said that if Britain wanted to maintain its trend economic growth, it needs 1 million additional migrants by 2030 just to stand still. So whatever the politicians say in a King Canute style about immigration politics, they can't hold back a demographic tidal wave, and those elderly people will need to be cared for. The workforce is not young enough, so you are strategically always going to be in the stronger position because you're new entrants in the labour market. And you must also understand that the numbers of people entering universities in the UK is now beginning to level off. So we're not seeing a growth in UK graduates who are potentially your competitors. So long term, between now and 2030, over the arc of your working lifetime, you are going to have a strategically strong bargaining position. And that's why I think you shouldn't worry about the vagaries of what politicians say. They will have to make decisions, they will have to make them before the 31st of December. So if this is the year in which you're taking your long-term career choices, you can tell your parents that you know by the end of the year precisely what the country's going to do. Whether or not that means that you know what you're going to do, well, you'll have to tell us what's the scale of your ambition, and we'll try and find the entry route into the immigration system which is going to be the most effective for you. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stephen. I guess I know I can call my mom today and tell her, Mom, I'm staying. Okay, so now I would like to invite our Perdana Fellows Alumni Association's representatives, Chi Yong. He is also the founder of Hot Movement, as well as Ms. Rachel Leong.